صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والليل إذا يغشى والنهار إذا تجلى وما خلق الذكر والأنثى إن سعيكم لشتى فأما من أعطى واتقى وصدق بالحسنى فسنيسره لليسرى وأما من بخل واستغنى وكذب بالحسنى فسنيسره للعسرى وما يغني عنه ماله إذا تردى إن علينا للهدى وإن لنا للآخرة والأولى فأنذرتكم نارا تلظى لا يصلاها إلا الأشقى الذي كذب وتولى وسيجنبها الأتقى الذي يؤتي ماله يتزكى وما لأحد عنده من نعمة تجزى إلا ابتغاء وجه ربه الأعلى ولسوف يرضى صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات.
Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajim. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. Thank you, Brother Abdullah, for the recitation of Quran. Inshallah, now I would like to invite our main speaker for tonight, Sheikh Hasan. Please invite him with a loud salawat.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين بارئ الخلائق أجمعين باعث الأنبياء والمرسلين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا المصطفى الأمجد والرسول المسدد المحمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين واللعن الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. وأما بعد فقد قال الله: قل يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. صدق الله العلي العظيم. I want to speak a little bit about the concepts of khawf and raja. So khawf is fear of Allah, and raja, and hope in Allah's mercy. So first I want to talk about the necessity of it and the fact that it's essential, and then the extent to which these qualities should be present in every believer. Then I want to get into a bit about what we mean by khawf. What should we have fear of? What should we have hope in? What do we mean by raja? What is our hope in? Do we have hope in ourselves, in our own deeds, or is it something else? And then finally, if we have time, I want to mention a short dua from Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, Sahifa Sajadiyya, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. That was his dua in fir rahba, for fear. So I'll start briefly because I think I think with the reason I try to relate the speeches to a masala shari'ah, something in fiqh, is because I think sometimes we view akhlaq as being something independent of fiqh, and perhaps the seriousness we attach to our salat and other things we might not see in certain akhlaq elements, whereas even in terms of fiqh, certain things are wajib on us, in terms of akhlaq and beliefs and so forth, and the Maraja have even very explicitly said, so that makes it clear cut for all of us. So in Minhaj al-Salihin, this is one of the greater sins. In fact, it's the second great sin that Sayyid Sistani mentions, and there's a reason for this. It was the emphasis in hadith, that amongst all the sins that one can commit, number 2 is this: Al-ya'su min rawhillah ay rahmatihi wa farajihi. Now I want to remind you, the first sin is shirk billah, associating partners with Allah. So what's the second greatest sin? According to this, I mean, he's not necessarily saying this is definitely, but one that's very much prioritized in hadith. Al-ya'su min rawhillah, to lose hope in Allah's mercy, to believe Allah's mercy cannot save you, wa farajihi, that He cannot relieve you of your problems, or that you won't be saved, that you have no hope. Wal amnu min makrillah, at the same time to feel that you are free of any sort of danger. So the first one is not having raja. The second one is not having khawf. These are 2 of the greatest sins. He says, Al-amnu min makrillah ta'ala ay adhabihi lil-asi wa akhdhihi min haythu la yahtasib. So for him to feel that if I sin, Allah's not going to do anything to me. That's what we mean by not having the khawf that would be one of the greatest sins. So I want to narrate a hadith that appears to be sahih, that it says, and there's many hadith similar to this, that it says, this is narrated from Ibn Abi Umair, عن بعض أصحابه, who narrates from some of his companions, عن أبي عبد الله, and Imam Sadiq عليه السلام, اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. He says, كان أبي يقول, so his father Imam Baqir عليه السلام would say, إنه ليس من عبد مؤمن إلا وفي قلبه نوران. So every mu'min has 2 nurs, has 2 lights, right? Nuru khifatin wa nuru raja'in. So he has one light of fear and one light of hope. He says, لو وزن هذا لم يزد على هذا ولو وزن هذا لم يزد على هذا. So he says, if you were to weigh this one of them, take, let's say raja, you were to weigh it against khawf, it wouldn't outweigh it. And similarly, if you weigh khawf against raja, they're exactly equal. You have the exact same amount of khawf as you do raja. This is every moment. So every believing servant should have these qualities, and they should be of equal nature. Now, another hadith in Usul Kafi mentions the same phrase, but it has something else as well in this hadith, which it says that to fear Allah, khaf Allah Azza wa Jal, khifatan law ji'tahu bi birr thaqalain la'adhabaka, warju Allah raja'an law ji'tahu bi dhunub thaqalain la rahimaka. So this says, and this gets, I believe this kind of gets the same point across, that they should be exactly equal in a way. So it says, fear Allah such that if you were to commit all the sins of this world, that Allah would have mercy on you. And have so much, have so much hope in Allah, that if you were to commit all the sins of this world, He would forgive you. And have fear of Allah, that if you perform all the good deeds of this world, He would punish you. So, in other words, and we're gonna keep building on this, don't have confidence in your deeds. And at the same time, don't feel that whatever deeds you've done is going to prevent Allah's mercy from encompassing you. So the key theme here is to rely on Allah's mercy and feel that, and remember that Allah's mercy always has the capability of saving you. And at the same time, our deeds are not going to save us. It's Allah's mercy that's going to save us. So that's the key theme throughout all of this. So, a narration in Usul Kafi that is essentially getting this message across of us not feeling confident in ourselves for our deeds. Our deeds, Allah doesn't need our deeds. Our deeds do nothing for Allah. They're for ourselves. And we know all the flaws in them. We know the flaws in our salat. We know the flaws in our fasting. So it doesn't make sense for a knowledgeable believer to feel that this is going to save him, right? To rely on this as opposed to Allah's mercy. So in volume 2 of Usul Kafi, the hadith that appears to be sahih, so an Abi Ubaidah al-Hadda, an Abi Jafar alayhi salam, Imam Baqir alayhi salam, قال اللهم صل على محمد. So he narrates that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد, قال الله تبارك وتعالى لا يتكل العاملون على أعمالهم. So Prophet ﷺ narrates that Allah said, people who perform deeds should not rely upon their deeds. لا يتكل العاملون على أعمالهم التي يعملونها لثوابي. Those deeds that they perform for my reward. فإنهم لو اجتهدوا وَأَتْعَبُوا أَنفُسَهُم. If they struggle and strive and tire themselves, أَعْمَارَهُمْ فِي عِبَادَتِي, their entire lives in my service, my servitude, كَانُوا مُقَصِّرِينَ غَيْرَ بَالِغِينَ في عبادتهم كُنْهَ عِبَادَتي فيما يطلبون عندي من كرامتي والنعيم في جناتي ورفيع درجاتي ورفيع الدرجات العلا في جواري. So he says, they can struggle their entire lives, spend their entire lives worshipping Allah, and they still will not be able to arrive at the reality of Allah's worship. غير بالغين في عبادتهم كنها عبادتي. They still can't perform worship as I am worthy of, as Allah is worthy of. They still can't, their worship will never be worthy of Allah. كنها عبادتي فيما يطلبون عندي. In that they are seeking this paradise, they're seeking all of this. Their ibadah will never deserve that in and of itself without Allah's mercy, right? So what does he say instead? وَلَكِنْ بِرَحْمَتِي فَلْيَثِقُوا. They should rely upon, they should be confident, they should trust my mercy. بِرَحْمَتِي فَلْيَثِقُوا وَفَضْلِي فَلْيَرْجُوا, and they should hope for my fadl, my grace. Grace is beyond adl. It's when Allah is giving you something that He didn't have to give you. He's giving you something, it's a bounty that He is bestowing upon you out of His love and His compassion. وَإِلَى حُسْنِ الظَّنِّ بِي فَلْيَطْمَئِنُّوا, and they can be certain in their husn al-dhan. Husn al-dhan, if anybody knows a good English translation, it's basically having a positive image of somebody. So if they think of me positively, they think of Allah positively, that they can rely upon. So their awareness of Allah's mercy and their awareness of Allah's bounties, and that is something that they should be certain in. فإن رحمتي عند ذلك تدركهم ومني يبلغهم رضواني ومغفرتي تلبسهم عفوي فإني أنا الله الرحمن الرحيم بذلك وبذلك تسميت. So again, the one thing that we should strive for and definitely feel that is when we are aware of Allah's mercy, is when we have a positive image of Allah. When we have a positive image of Allah, we should understand that we're on the right path to not ever cutting off hope from Allah's mercy. عن بريد بن معاوية عن أبي جعفر عليه السلام, Imam Baqir عليه السلام, he says that it's been narrated that that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam he says, وَالَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ, the Prophet ﷺ swears by Allah, He who there is no other God but Him, مَا أُعْطِيَ مُؤْمِنٌ قَطُّ خَيْرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ إِلَّا بِحُسْنِ ظَنِّهِ بِاللَّهِ وَرَجَائِهِ لَهُ وَحُسْنِ خُلُقِهِ وَالْكَفْ عَنْ اغْتِيَابِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So he says that the goodness of this world and the afterlife, no mu'min has been given other than for the first attribute he mentions, husni dhannihi billahi wa rajaihi. So his hope in Allah and his thinking positively about Allah. And it mentions other things, his good akhlaq and refraining from backbiting believers. And then similarly he says, وَالَّذِي لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا هُ لَا يُعَذِّبُ اللَّهُ مُؤْمِنًا بَعْدَ التَّوْبَةِ. So he says Allah never punishes a believer after he has repented. بَعْدَ التَّوْبَةِ وَالْإِسْتِغْفَارِ إِلَّا بِسُوءِ ظَنِّهِ بِاللَّهِ وَتَقْصِيرِهِ مِنْ رَجَائِهِ وَسُوءِ خُلُقِهِ وَاغْتِيَابِهِ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Okay, so now I want to mention now, just to help us visualize the extent to which Allah's mercy can encompass us. So just for us to really grasp that we should never lose hope, no matter, God forbid, no matter how far we may go astray or the sins we may commit, to never lose hope in Allah's mercy. I want to narrate a few examples from hadith. The first one is in Sheikh Saduq's Amali, where he essentially says that that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam said, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He says, إِذَا كَانَ يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ نَشَرَ اللَّهُ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى رَحْمَتُهُ حَتَّى يَطْمَعَ إِبْلِيسُ فِي رَحْمَتِهِ. He says that on the Day of Judgment, when Allah's mercy is spread amongst all of mankind, it'll be so much, the mercy, that even Iblis will be greedy and will be thinking that I have a chance. He says, let me seek Allah's mercy as well. So the amount of mercy that will exist on that day is so much that even, of course, this hadith, in terms of the sanad and stuff, I can't say that it's definitely sahih, but it's just one way of helping us visualize. The next couple hadith are sahih, that do appear to be sahih. And they're two hadith that one of my teachers in Tehran would mention on the minbar when he would speak. And that's why they've kind of stuck with me. They're very powerful, I think, in a way, for helping us, again, visualize this incredible amount of mercy, no matter how lowly we might view ourselves. So This is, I'm taking it from Wasa'il al-Shi'a, volume 15, page 232. عن ابن رئاب قال سمعت أبا عبد الله السلام يقول يؤتى بعبد يوم القيامة ظالم لنفسه فيقول الله له ألم آمرك بطاعتي. So one of Allah's servants is brought on the day of judgment, and he says who had sinned, and then Allah says to him, did I not command you to obey me? Did I not tell you to obey me? Alam anhaka an ma'siyati. Did I not forbid you from sinning against me, from transgressing me, my orders? فَيَقُولُ بَلَى. He does not deny this. He says yes. وَلَكِنْ غَلَبَتْ عَلَيَّ. So here's his reasoning. وَلَكِنْ غَلَبَتْ عَلَيَّ شَهْوَتِي. He says, but I was weak. My shahwa, my passion for things that you had forbidden, I couldn't control myself. So in other words, he didn't do this rebelliously. He didn't do it because he doesn't like Allah. He doesn't do it because he didn't like Islam. He was just weak in front of sin. Sins that pleasurable sins. Shahwati. فَإِن تُعَذِّبْنِي فَبِذَنْبِي لَمْ تَظْلِمْنِي. He says, so if you were to punish me, then it's for my sin. فَبِذَنْبِي لَمْ تَظْلِمْنِي. He says, if you were to punish me, it's for my sin. There's no oppression on your side. You haven't wronged me in any way. I deserve it. He's confessing. So this is all showing his awareness of Allah. This mu'min was, or this servant was aware of his duties to Allah. He just didn't act on it. لَمْ تَظْلِمْنِي فَيَأْمُرُ اللَّهُ بِهِ إِلَى النَّارِ. So Allah commands him to be taken to the hellfire. He's confessed. Imagine a court, where the guy has come and confessed to every crime. Okay, there's no case. Send him to prison, or in this case, the hellfire. فَيَقُولُ. But the man, he doesn't stop here. The guy, he turns and he says, فَيَقُولُ مَا كَانَ هَذَا ظَنِّي بِكَ. This is not the way I imagined you. This is not what I thought of you. Right? Even though I was a sinner, my image of you, the mercy that I imagined in you was so much greater than this. I thought you wouldn't even punish me, even for someone who's clearly a sinner. فَيَقُولُ مَا كَانَ ظَنُّكَ بِي. So what did you think of me? قال كان ظني بك أحسن ظن. I thought the best of you that was possible. فيأمر الله به إلى الجنة. So Allah says, take him to paradise. فيقول الله تبارك وتعالى لقد نفعك حسن ظنك بي الساعة. He says, your belief and your image of me, your positive image of me, thinking of me in a positive way, in my mercy, now, as-sa'a, so it's right now, in this afterlife, it saved you. It's benefited you. So here we have someone who, based on his deeds, he deserved hellfire. But because he never lost hope in Allah, even on the day of judgment, he found salvation. Now here's where it gets a bit interesting. I think we're going to have some questions about this hadith. But it appears to be sahih. Based on, again, the mabna of Sayyid Zanjani, it would be sahih. So in the same part of Wasa'il, one page earlier, 231, and it's also narrated in Thawab al-A'mal. So Abdurrahman ibn al-Hajjaj narrates that Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, al-Imam Jafar as-Sadiq alayhi salam, similar. I'll just go through the English briefly because I don't want to take too much time. Similar. So he says that the final servant who was commanded to go to hellfire, he turns back. فَيَقُولُ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ, أَعْجِلُوهُ, says take him off to hellfire, off, like in a hurry, or send him off to hellfire. And then, I'm sorry. No, he says أَعْجِلُوهُ. So, okay, it's assumed that he brings him to her. He says, فَإِذَا أُتِيَ بِهِ. So he's brought to Allah. قَالَ لَهُ يَا عَبْدِي لِمَا الْتَفَتْ. So the servant turns to Allah, and Allah says, okay, bring him to me. Okay. And he says, so why did you turn back? So again, here, we're going to see something interesting, but still here, this is the afterlife, and his belief in Allah's mercy, that until the final second, that Allah's mercy can still encompass even him. This is what's key. So he had turned to Allah after he was off to hell. Still hadn't lost hope. التفت فيقول يا ربي ما كان ظني بك هذا. He says, I didn't think of you like this. فيقول الله جل جلاله عبدي وما كان ظنك بي. So what did you think? فيقول يا ربي كان ظني بك أن تغفر لي خطيئتي. I thought you would forgive me my crimes, my grievances. وتسكنني جنتك, and you would place me in paradise. فيقول الله ملائكتي وعزتي وآلائي وبلائي وارتفاع مكاني ما ظن بي هذا ساعة من حياته خيرا قط. He says, this person, not 1 hour, not one time in his life on this earth did he think of me like this. This is not the way this is not the way he acted. He did not. He says, وَلَوْ ظَنَّ بِي سَاعَةً مِنْ حَيَاتِهِ خَيْرًا مَا رَوَّعْتُهُ بِالنَّارِ. If he had thought 1 hour in his life, if he had thought positively about me, I wouldn't have threatened him with the hellfire. I wouldn't have put this fear in him. But he says, أَجِيزُ لَهُ كَذِبَهُ. He says, give him this lie of his that he says in this world, I thought of you this way. He says, give him this lie of his. وَأَدْخِلُوهُ الْجَنَّةِ, and place him in paradise. ثم قال أبو عبد الله الإسلام ما ظن عبد بالله خيرا إلا كان الله عند ظنه به. So he says, whenever somebody thinks of Allah in a positive way, Allah treats him the same way that he thinks of Allah. So when you think positively of Allah, that Allah, you honestly, when we can be honest with ourselves, no matter what we think, that Allah is going to be merciful to us, His mercy is all-encompassing, then Allah deals with you in accordance with the way you think of Him. And the same, similar if you think negatively of Allah. And he says, وَذَلِكَ قَوْلُهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ وَذَلِكُمْ ظَنُّكُمُ الَّذِي ظَنَنْتُمْ بِرَبِّكُمْ أَرْدَاكُمْ فَأَصْبَحْتُمْ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. So this is in response to those disbelievers who thought that Allah did not have the knowledge to know their sins and so forth. And it says, because of this, they're associating negative things with Allah, they became losers. And this is a verse, Surah Fussilat, verse 23. So one more point about hope is that sometimes the simplest deeds can cause salvation. As we're nearing the Shahada of Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, well, actually, okay, this is from Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam. It says Abdullah bin Sinan narrates that he says that Allah revealed to Dawood, أوحى الله عز وجل إلى داود عليه السلام إن العبد من عبادي ليأتيني بالحسنة فأبيحه جنتي فقال داود يا ربي وما تلك الحسنة. So he says that one of my servants comes to me in the afterlife, with a good deed. And he says, so I allow him to go into paradise. And then Dawood asks Allah, what is this? Ya Rabbi, وَمَا تِلْكَ الْحَسَنَ. What is this good deed that he performed? It says, يُدْخِلُ عَلَى عَبْدِ الْمُؤْمِنِ سُرُورًا وَلَوْ بِتَمْرَةٍ. He says, he brings joy to a believer. And going back to our discussion for Salatul Jum'ah, the value, the very elevated station of performing good deeds to your fellow brethren, it's very has a lot of merit. Here's another example. So one good deed, like bringing joy to a fellow believer, even if it's by means of one date, giving him a date to that he takes pleasure in, that pleases your brother. So قال Dawood. So the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam, his response is, Ya Rabbi, حق لمن عرفك أن لا يقطع رجاءه منك. He says, someone who knows you, this is a key. من عرفك. So if somebody knows Allah, really, they have no right to ever lose hope in Allah. So, I'm not trying to give us false hope here and think that anybody can do anything and then and just think of Allah positively in the afterlife and they'll be saved. No, it says man arafaka. So there has to be a ma'rifah. There has to be a knowledge. You have to know Allah, and to know Allah, that requires some degree of obviously work. And we never know what bad deeds are going to lead to us losing hope or losing knowledge of Allah. That's the ثم كانت عاقبة الذين أساءوا السوء and كذبوا بآيات الله. So those who committed so many bad deeds, in the end they denied Allah's signs. So we never know if our bad deeds are going to accumulate and cause us to deny Allah and Allah's signs and become disbelievers. So it's not like we can rely, and that's the next discussion, which is on fear. Um, so first of all, what do we mean by fear? So this is a hadith that appears to be Sahih in Kafi, volume 2, page 70. عن داود الرقي عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام محمد says قال الله عز وجل وَلِمَنْ خَافَ مَقَامَ رَبِّهِ جَنَّتان. So Surah Ar-Rahman, verse 49. So he who fears the station of Allah, he has two jannatan, has two paradises. قال من علم أن الله يراه ويسمع ما يقول ويعلم ما يعلمه من خير أو شر فيحجزه ذلك عن القبيح من الأعمال فذلك الذي خاف مقام ربه ونهى النفس عن الهوى. So he says, who is the one who fears Allah? Who's the one who, what does that mean? He says, so, it means that you know that Allah sees you, that He hears you, He knows what you know, whether it's good or bad. And so this knowledge encourages you to act on it. فَيَحْجُزُ ذَلِكَ, that prevents him from sinning. عَنَ الْقَبِيحِ مِنَ الْأَعْمَالِ. That is one who has fear of Allah. But do we really have fear of Allah? Is it Allah who we're afraid of, or is it our own deeds? Right? I mean, what is there to be afraid of Allah? He's nothing but the most perfect attributes. So obviously, what we're concerned with is two things. One is our past deeds, and one is what we might commit in the future. We don't know what's going to happen before we pass away. We don't know what we might fall into. This should place a mu'min. And again, all these things I said about raja, that amount of raja that I tried to instill in all of us right now imagine you have that much fear, right? That amount of fear is what we should have in our own deeds, right? Even if someone thinks they're very mu'min, we've done small sins, and small sins, at the very least, a small sin for someone who really knows Allah is a very big deal. It's a very big insult and a very big. It's unimaginable. Think about it, for the imams to commit the smallest of sins because of their knowledge of Allah. And we, might come across these sins, all the time. Smaller sins that we might think, okay, well, I'm still on the general path of iman. But these, in the imam's eyes, would be very large. So again, what we're concerned with is all of these deeds up until now and the deeds that are going to follow. We have no idea to what extent and what our station is and where we'll end up, whether it's paradise or hell. And that, for a mu'min, is very something that concerns him. But it's not a kind of fear that prevents him from acting. It's a fear that motivates you to act, as we're going to come across. It's not that you have fear and that you, again, lose hope. So Abi Ubaidah al-Hadha and Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, قال المؤمن بين مخافتين. The mu'min has two fears. بين مخافتين. ذنب قد مضى لا يدري ما صنع الله فيه. So, a sin that he's committed and he doesn't know what Allah has done with it. Has Allah forgiven him or not? We don't know if our istighfar, if our seeking Allah's forgiveness, we don't know if it was accepted or not. We don't know how sincere we were, right? We don't know if when we were doing istighfar, if we were just doing it to feel better and to feel that, okay, I'm not going to be punished, whereas we might know that we might fall into that again. So how sincere was it? وعمر قد بقي لا يدري ما يكتسب فيه من المهالك فهو لا يصبح إلا خائفا ولا يصلحه إلا الخوف. So again, this is a hadith that appears to be sahih. So it says that in the rest of his life, where he doesn't know what he might acquire in terms of bad deeds, he doesn't know what other bad deeds he might fall into, min al-mahalik, that could destroy him. So the mu'min, right? We're talking about the mu'min. He says he doesn't wake up. He only wakes up in a state of fear. The mu'min, true mu'min here, he only wakes up aware of this, that he sinned and that he might sin in the future. And for that, because of his strong awareness and his strong knowledge of Allah's ma'arif, of Islamic ma'arif, he only wakes up in a state of fear. In other words, concerned about his akhirah. وَلَا يُصْلِحُهُ إِلَّا الْخَوْفِ. And the only thing appropriate for him is khawf. Okay. Okay. Now, so again, the point that I just mentioned, that this fear and this hope, they're not things that should kind of prevent us from acting. They should move us to action. So, just to give very simple examples, let's say that we have hope, and there's something that we really like, or let's just say someone hasn't seen their family for a long time, and they arrive in that city. Their hope or their enthusiasm for seeing their beloved is going to cause them to move even faster and faster, to get to their destination even faster. Let's say, right? It's not gonna slow them down at all, right? So they're not gonna say, "Oh, I'm gonna see them, so let me just take it easy, and I'll get there when I get there." So for a moment to say that he has hope in something, has hope in Allah's mercy, and he doesn't move towards it, well, he's lying, right? If you say that I have hope that Allah's mercy is going to encompass me, that enthusiasm and that hope for that mercy is going to make us do more good deeds, right? Because we're going to see that we're getting somewhere, and that we're going to be aware of this beautiful, all of this mercy. So it's motivational. Similarly with khawf, if we're really afraid of something, right, we're not just going to sit and be relaxed. It's going to also motivate us to avoid it. So in this hadith it says, لا يكون المؤمن مؤمنا حتى يكون خائفا راجيا ولا يكون خائفا راجيا حتى يكون عالما لما يخاف ويرجو. لما يخاف ويرجو. Okay, so it says that a mu'min is only a mu'min when he has khawf and raja, when he has fear and he has hope. And he only has fear and hope حتى يكون عالما لما يخاف ويرجو. He only has fear and hope when he acts on those things that he has fear and hope of. Right? So the if you guys aren't tired, I was gonna read this dua from Sahifa Sajjadiyah that covers a lot of these topics, and because it's always good to read these duas and duas from the Imams, where they're confessing to Allah their shortcomings, because we can always put that in, it makes us really realize our station and how much work we have to do, to the point where we can at least understand what the Imams are, if that's even possible, to understand what the Imams are embarrassed about in terms of their deeds. So this is the dua number 50. It says, Allahumma innaka khalaqtani sawiyan wa rabbaytani saghiran wa razaqtani makfiyan. So he begins with mentioning the mercy and the bounties that Allah has bestowed upon him. So reminding us that there's so much to be thankful for, that Allah has always surrounded us with mercy. You created me without any sort of flaws, and you nurtured me when I was little, and you provided me anything that I needed. Allahumma inni wajadtu fima anzalta min kitabika wa basharta bihi ibadaka an qulta ya ibadi alladhina asrafu ala anfusihim. The verse we mentioned in the beginning. Ya ibadi alladhina asrafu ala anfusihim la taqnatu min rahmatillah inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'a. So he says, he begins pleading with Allah, making his case. Allah, you told your servants to never lose hope in your mercy, because Allah forgives all sins. وَقَدْ تَقَدَّمَ مِنِّي مَا قَدْ عَلَمْتَ وَمَا أَنْتَ أَعْلَمُ بِهِ مِنِّي. He says, but that which I have done, and you know better than I have done, I've committed things that you know, that you are fully aware of. فَيَا سَوْءَةَ مِمَّا أَحْسَاهُ عَلَيَّ كِتَابُكَ. So he says, he's shame upon these deeds that I've done that your book has forbidden. The Quran has explicitly spoken out against. فلولا المواقف التي أؤمل من عفوك الذي شمل كل شيء لألقيت بيدي ولو أن أحدا استطاع الهرب من ربه لكنت أنا أحق بالهرب منك. So basically he's saying that if anybody were to run away from you for his deeds, I, the Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, says that I would be the most worthy of running away from you. You know, if it was, but it's not possible. وأنت لا تخفى عليك خافية في الأرض ولا في السماء. You know everything. Nothing can hide from you. إلا أتيت بها وكفى بك جازيا وكفى بك حسيبا. And you are the one who, who punishes and rewards, and no one else. اللهم إنك طالبي إن أنا هربت ومدركي إن أنا فررت. If I run away from you, you'll come get me. You'll come after me. There's nowhere to run. فها أنا ذا بين يديك خاضع ذليل راغم. He says, here I am in front of you, abject, lowly, abased, humbled. إن تعذبني فإني لذلك أهل. So like the man that we mentioned who confessed, he says, yes, I deserve your punishment. The Imam says, if you were to punish me, I know that I deserve it. إني لذلك فإني لذلك أهل. وهو يا ربي منك عدل. And this is justice on your part. I'm fully deserving of it, and this would be in accordance with your justice. وإن تعفو عني فقديما شملني عفوك وألبستني عافيتك. He says, but if you overlook my flaws, well, you've been doing this forever. Remember, mentioned in the beginning of this, Allah's, that He mentions all the mercies and the bounties. He says, if you were to overlook my flaws, this is something you've always been doing for me. So it would be nothing new. So this is within your power. This is something that I see in you, that I can attribute to you. So your justice necessitates one thing, but your mercy necessitates another thing. فَأَسْأَلُكَ اللَّهُمَّ بِالْمَخْزُونِ مِنْ أَسْمَائِكَ وَبِمَا وَارَتْهُ الْحُجْبُ مِنْ بَهَائِكَ إِلَّا رَحِمْتَ هذه النفس الجزوعة وهذه الرمة الهلوعة التي لا تستطيع حر شمسك فكيف تستطيع حر نارك. So similar language to Dua Kumail. It says, I ask you by your splendor and to have mercy on the soul that on these uneasy and decaying bones that cannot even endure the heat of the sun. So how am I supposed to tolerate, like we read in Dua Kumail, how am I supposed to tolerate your punishment in the afterlife? So it's pleading to Allah's mercy. Remember, just to review, He never mentions, I did this, I worshipped you, I did all these deeds. He's saying I deserve punishment. But you've always been merciful to me. And now, how am I supposed to? So he's expressing his weakness, and this is the essence of man, that we are nothing but weakness and in need of Allah. That is where our perfection lies. Antumul fuqara ila Allah. We are the ones who are in need. That is who we are, of Allah. And the more we realize that, the more we reach our perfection. Right? So he says, فَكَيْفَ تَسْتَطِيعُ حَرَّ النَّارِ. So how am I supposed to tell? وَالَّتِي لَا تَسْتَطِيعُ صَوْتَ رَعْدِكَ. He says, I can't even tolerate the sound of thunder. Of thunder, of the sound of thunder. فَكَيْفَ تَسْتَطِيعُ كيف تستطيع صوت غضبك. So he says, how am I supposed to tolerate the sound of your wrath? Yeah, I think this should be yastati. I don't know why this is, so it should be كيف يستطيع حر نارك and كيف يستطيع صوت رعدك. So how is such a servant supposed to be able to tolerate these things? فارحمني اللهم فإني امرؤ حقير وخطري يسير وليس عذابي مما يزيد في ملكك مثقال ذرة. He says, I am vile. He says, but punishing me will add nothing to your majesty, to your kingdom. In other words, you don't gain anything from punishing me. Right? ولو أن عذابي مما يزيد في ملكك لسألتك الصبر عليه. أحببت أن يكون ذلك لك ولكن سلطانك اللهم أعظم وملكك أدوم من أن تزيد فيه طاعة المطيعين. He says, but your kingdom is such that the obedience of those who obey you doesn't add anything. أو تنقص منه معصية المذنبين. And similarly, no sin can reduce anything from your kingdom. فارحمني يا أرحم الراحمين وتجاوز عني يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وتب علي إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. So he says that, so based on all of this, I'm weak, I've sinned, but you are merciful. You've always been merciful to me. And nothing will be reduced from your kingdom. So therefore, bestow even more mercy than you have. Give me even more, because I know you're capable of that. I have hope in you. And forgive me. إِنَّكَ أَنْتَ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ. You are ever turning towards your servants and all compassionate. وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Inshallah, we have like 15 minutes, so we'll have a quick question answer. So if you have a question, please raise your hand and please come forward. We have a little bit problem with the microphone, so we can.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum salam wa rahmatullah.
MashaAllah, very powerful messages, good guidance. But how do we know, accepting the fact that our fear and our hope should be balanced,
Yes.
how do we know we have it balanced? How do you judge or measure that?
I mean, I think just by keeping these things in mind, we'll achieve the amount of fear and hope that I think by reading these type of hadith and reminding ourselves, and also just reading the Quran, when you come across in the Quran, we come across verses of bashara, and then we come other ones that are warning us of punishment, that are instilling in us fear for sins. I think by reading these things and keeping them in mind, I don't know if we can ever, I don't know if this hadith is demanding that we, that we get to a balance. Because I don't know how we can really measure that. But like the other hadith said, there's two nurs, right? This is nuran. So I think for most of us, a lot of the times we're one or the other, right? So I think if we can always keep both in mind, I think that is a big accomplishment, right? So I think in times of where we're on a good streak and alhamdulillah, we're staying away from sin, we shouldn't be too sure of ourselves. We shouldn't have ujb, right? That's one of the greatest flaws, is for someone to feel, wow, I did this. I wish, if we ever feel something like that, we know that our khawf is missing. And at the same time, if we feel down on ourselves, what's the point? I'm not getting anywhere. I'm a sinner. I have no hope. I'm going to hell for sure. I know it. Then we know that our khawf is so. Just in terms of the average believer's spiritual station, I think keeping those two nurs in us at all times is one beneficial thing. But yeah, I don't know if we can ever know if we've achieved that balance. Yeah.
Sister, do you have a question? I hear people talking there. If you have a question, we'll give you the mic. It could be general, not necessarily about a subject or anything. Well, if people don't have a question on the subject, they don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can try.
Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh Hasan.
Alaikum salam wa
Thanks again
rahmatullah.
for your time
Sure.
and the speech. So, as university students, I can give the example that a lot of times on campus we're approached by people of Christian congregations, and along the lines of what you're talking about, have equal fear and equal hope. They approach us with this concept of put all your how do you say, put all your eggs in one basket when believing in like Jesus Christ alayhi salam, and that His blood is salvation, right? Obviously, we don't accept that theory or concept. But as you were talking about, you have to have an equal belief or equal nur. Is it possible that the more you observe one, the other grows equally, or is it that, like you said, you have to keep both in mind?
Yeah.
Like, what I'm saying is like with performing more good deeds or observing humility, your khawf grows as much as your what's the word for the other one?
Raja.
Raja does.
Yeah.
Is that I don't know.
I mean, I think like these verses said, when you have khawf, it says you will not be khaif and raji until you act on. Like I was saying, it's like like I was trying to give the example of someone, let's say he's walking towards his family and he hasn't seen them forever. He's not gonna say, okay, I'll just sit here. I'll see them eventually. He's excited. He's enthusiastic. He has hope in seeing them. This might not be the best example, but the point is, if your hope is sincere, it's going to motivate you to work. So that means you're going to do more and more good deeds. And if your hope is sincere, you're going to refrain from bad deeds. And other than that, anything else, if someone says they have hope for raja, then they're not telling the truth. That's I don't know, that doesn't really answer your question, but yeah, if you, the more good deeds you do, and with awareness of Allah, and deeds. The thing about, well, this is a different discussion, but the relationship between amal and iman, from a lot of scholars have said it's a two-way thing, right? So the more good amal you do, your iman will increase. But the stronger your iman, the more you're inclined to do amal. So it's a interchangeable. There's a relationship from both sides. So yeah, doing good deeds would definitely increase because you're investing in something, right? When you're doing good deeds, it's you're aware of the rewards, the possible rewards for that, and now you feel like you're building something. So that obviously encourages you. When someone's getting somewhere, they're usually more inclined to continue on that path and building their akhirah, inshallah. Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Last night, in your speech, you had a discussion about the unbeliever. You mentioned at the beginning that if it was not for the moment to be confused, I would give them gold and houses with all of these characteristics that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Down the road in your speech, you mentioned that Allah will not give them water, even a cup of water or something like that.
Yeah.
I was kind of confused because
Yeah.
at the beginning you mentioned Allah will give them all of these worthy things,
Yeah.
but down the discussion you mentioned there was a kind of
We discussed
confusion.
We discussed this briefly. So the dunya as it is. So the dunya for what it is right now, okay, which in Allah's eyes, according to the hadith that we mentioned, it's not even as valuable as the wing of a mosquito. Because of its low value, Allah has no problem in giving the disbelievers everything. Wrap them in gold, give them homes of made of precious metals. Allah has no problem in that. Because the dunya has no value in and of itself, if it's not used to build your akhirah. So the other hadith is saying, if the dunya had value in Allah's eyes, so if it had merit, so in Allah's eyes, like we said, something that has value is the akhirah. The dunya has no value except in that it can be used towards the akhirah. So he says, if in Allah's eyes the dunya had any merit at all, well, then he wouldn't give his enemy even water to drink, because they haven't even deserved that. They haven't done anything to deserve Allah's mercy that's specific to believers, that's specific to good deeds. They haven't deserved that. So they wouldn't even deserve water. But that's not what the dunya is. The dunya is not based off of their good deeds and merit. Therefore, they can have their water. In fact, they can have gold. In fact, they can have the richest countries in the world, which they do, right? Because that's not the way we should view the dunya, as if it's given out or parceled out because of good deeds. It's not. I don't know if that makes it clear. Yeah, because this was a point of confusion for a couple of people.
Also, I have one more question on your discussion, is that related to the behavior of the moment in general. We are now, the whole world is like a small village. We are living mingled with all different type of cultures. One of the values in this culture, especially in this culture, is that you show off whatever you have, even what you don't have. People, they don't have the knowledge, but they pretend they have it.
Yeah.
So this sense of humility and this sense of, self-awareness for the mu'mineen, it just bring them down to the earth. You know what I'm saying? In general, that concept I have been thinking for a long time. It's very hard to. So when you are in this world, living in this world, as a moment you're just trying to bring yourself down, although you might have a lot of qualification when you compare to the others, doesn't bring a sense of conflict, because in the culture that you're living, everything show off, although people they don't deserve and judged by. But however, when you show a sense of humbleness at work and the environment everywhere, as you are kind of like, this concept is not good for this culture. You know what I'm saying? So what do you think about that?
Again, and we mentioned this last night, the dunya, we don't have to live in poverty or not, make the minimal amount of money or anything. That's not the point. The point is that whatever dunya we do have, it should be for the akhirah. It should be for some cause. So, mashallah, a lot of the brothers have good jobs and they make good money, and they're investing in the masjid. They're investing in Islam. So, and there's hadith about this, that, someone comes to one of the imams and says, I like having money and this. And he says, well, what do you want the money for? And he says, so I love the dunya. He says, the mom asks him, according to this hadith, what do you want the dunya for? He says, I want to go on hajj, I want to do this, I want to spend it on Islam, I want to do that. He says, that's not dunya, that's akhirah. There's no problem with that. But for us to say that, well, the non-believers, or people who are that are ungrateful towards Allah, they live like this, and in this society, that's the way you're supposed to live. Well, we don't take that as a model, right? We don't learn anything ethically from them. But I mean, at the same time, yeah, a mu'min in society, he shouldn't. I mean, you can't live in such a way that you'll be disgraced amongst people. You can't, for instance, I mean, I'm not saying it's definitely haram to do whatever, but I mean, it's definitely not appropriate for sure to, for instance, wear, let's say, a torn up old shirt, a raggedy shirt, or things that are not viewed as, okay, I'll tell you the official fiqh thing is that libas shuhra, right, for instance. This is one clear example. So clothes that makes you well known, right? So in other words, if you wear this, everybody will say, oh, that's the guy, or everybody will notice it, everybody will be aware of it. Clothes that does that in the sense that it humiliates you in front of people. So in other words,